Our decision to leave the European Union faces the creative industry with a variety of threats that could harm their future, both in financial and in human terms. So I'm delighted to be their guest this afternoon to talk of Brexit. For years, the European debate has been dominated by the fringes of opinion, by strong supporters of Europe or by convinced opponents. But as we approach Brexit, the voice of middle opinion mustn't be overlooked. I am neither a Europhile nor a Eurosceptic. As Prime Minister, I said no to federal integration, no to the euro currency, and no to Schengen, which introduced free movement of people within the European Union, but without proper control of external borders. But I am a realist, and I believe that to risk losing our trade advantage with the colossal market on our doorstep is to inflict economic self-harm on the British people. Of course, the will of the people can't be ignored, but Parliament has a duty also to consider the well-being of the people. No one voted for higher prices and poorer public services, but that's what they may get. The emerging evidence suggests Brexit will hurt most those who have least, and neither Parliament nor government wish to see that. The will of the people, so often summed up when sound argument is absent, was supported by 37% of the electorate. 63% voted either in favour of remaining as a member of the European Union or did not vote at all. So there was a majority for Brexit, but there was no overwhelming mandate to ignore the reservations of 16 million voters who believe it will be a harmful change of direction for our country. Brexit has been the most divisive issue of my political lifetime. It's divided not only the four nations of the United Kingdom, but regions within those nations. It's divided political parties, political colleagues, families, friends, and the young from the old, as the ballot box showed us very clearly on referendum day. Now, we have to heal those divisions. They've been made worse by the character of the Brexit debate so far, with its intolerance, its bullying, and its name-calling. I welcome rigorous debate, but there must be respect for differing views honestly held. In this debate, there are no Ramonas, no mutineers, no enemies of the people, just voices setting out what they believe is right for our country. In recent weeks, the idea has gained ground that Brexit won't be too bad, that we'll all get through it, that we're doing better than expected, and that all will be well. Of course we will get through it. Life as we know it won't come to an end. We're too resourceful and talented a nation for that. But our nation is owed a frank assessment of what leaving Europe may mean, both for now and for the future. I fear that we will be weaker and less prosperous as a country and as individuals. And although it grieves me to admit it, our divorce from Europe will diminish our international stature. Indeed, I would argue it already has. For decades, we British have supercharged our influence around the world by our closeness to the United States, where policy divisions are broadening, and our membership of the European Union, which we are abandoning. As a result, we are already becoming a lesser actor. No one, leaver or remainer, can welcome that. We're all urged to be patriotic and to get behind Brexit, but it is precisely because I am patriotic that I'm opposed to it. I want my country to be influential, not isolated. I want it committed, not cut off. I want it to be a leading participant, not a bystander. And I want us to be richer, not poorer. Yet every serious international body, including the IMF, the OECD, the Institute for Fiscal Studies, the National Institute for Economic and Social Research, as well as prize-winning Nobel economists, all forecast we will be poorer outside the European Union. Of course, such forecasts could be wrong, but to dismiss them out of hand is reckless in the extreme. Our own government have also assessed our post-Brexit position upon three separate criteria: that we stay in the single market, that we reach a trade deal with Europe, or that we fail to do so. Each option, carefully assessed, shows us to be worse off, and disastrously so, with no trade deal at all. And the poorest regions will be those that are hurt the most. Now, if, as the negotiations proceed, this analysis turns out to be correct, that cannot be brushed aside. I know of no precedent for any government enacting a policy that will make both our country and our people poorer. Once that is apparent, the government must change course. Meanwhile, we're yet again told that all will be well. Certainly, the recent fall in the value of sterling has temporarily boosted our exports. The strength of the world economy may even increase our forecast growth this year. But this sweet spot is artificial. It won't last. Prosperity isn't built on devaluing the currency. More exports on the back of other countries' economic growth is not a secure economic position. The United Kingdom, our country, has been at the very top of European growth over many years. We are now the laggard at the bottom. We have become the slowest of the world's big economies. And that has happened post-referendum, but even before we surrender the familiar advantages of the single market. Our negotiations, so far, have not always been sure-footed. Some agreements have been reached, but in many areas only because the United Kingdom has given ground. Our determination to negotiate the divorce bill and a new trade deal at the same time was going to be, you may recall, the fight of the summer. Instead, it became an immediate British retreat. There was to be a points-based immigration system. There isn't, and there won't be. We were to become then the Singapore of the North. We've retreated now from a policy of lower taxes and deregulation. No transition period was going to be needed, but we've now asked for one, during which we will accept new European Union rules, European court jurisdiction, and free movement of people. Now, I don't remind you of this to be critical. I do so to illustrate that unrealistic aspirations once set out are usually followed by ignominious retreat. And that is a lesson for the negotiations that are still to come. They will be the most complex, the most difficult that any government has faced. Our aims in those negotiations must be realistic, and I am not personally sure that they yet are. We simply cannot move forward with leaving the European Union, the single market, the customs union, and the European Court of Justice, whilst at the same time demanding an à la carte, beneficial to Britain, bespoke entrance to the European market. It is simply not a credible negotiating position. A willingness to compromise is essential. If either side, the United Kingdom or the European Union, both sides, either side, if either side is too inflexible, too unbending, too wedded to what they won't do rather than what they could do, then the negotiations will fail. The very essence of negotiation involves both give and take. But there are always red lines that neither side wishes to cross. In successful negotiations, those red lines are traded for concessions. If our red lines are held to be inviolable, the likelihood of no deal or a very poor deal increases. Every single time we close off options prematurely, this encourages the European Union to do the same, and that is not in our British interest. A good Brexit for Britain will protect our trade advantages. It will enable us to continue to sell our goods and services without disruption, to import and export food without barriers and without extra cost. It will enable us to staff our hospitals, our universities, and our businesses with the skills we need, where and when we need them. It will involve being part of the cutting edge of European research, in which British brains and British skills can lead the way. And it will mean we continue with the over 40 free trade agreements that cover nearly 60 countries in total that we have with countries only as a result of our membership of the European Union. A bad Brexit for Britain will surrender these and other advantages. For the moment, our self-imposed red lines have boxed the government into a corner. They are so tilted to ultra-Brexit opinion, even the Cabinet cannot agree them, and a majority in both Houses of Parliament oppose them. If maintained in full, it will be impossible to reach a favourable trade agreement. Alarmed at the negotiations so far, the financial sector, businesses, and our academic institutions are pleading for common sense policy to serve the national interest, and fearful they may not get it, are making their own preparations for the future. Japanese car makers, through the Japanese ambassador, warned they could close operations in Britain unless we maintain free access to the European Union. That would be heartbreaking for many people in Sunderland, in Swindon, or in South Wales. And this isn't Project Fear revisited, it is Project Know Your History. Any doubters should consult the former employees of factories now closed in Bridgend, Port Talbot, and Newport, where jobs were lost and families suffered. In 1991, employment by Japanese firms in Wales was about 17,000 people. Today, it is 2,000. If free access to Europe is lost, that scale of impact, if carried across the United Kingdom, could lose 125,000 jobs with Japanese firms. Over many years, the Conservative Party has understood the concerns of business. Not over Brexit, it seems. Across the United Kingdom, businesses are expressing their wish to stay in the single market and the customs union. But no, say the government's red lines. Businesses wish to have the freedom to employ foreign skills. But no, say the government's red lines. Business and academia wish to welcome foreign students to our universities and, as they rise to influence back in their own countries, would then have willing partners in politics and business for decades to come. But no, say the government's red lines. This is not only grand folly, it is bad politics. The national interest must always be above the party interest. But my party should beware. It is only fear of Mr. Corbyn and Mr. McDonnell that prevents a hemorrhage of business support. Without the comprehensive trade deal that the Prime Minister so rightly seeks, we risk economic divorce from the European Union and the chill embrace of a hard Brexit with World Trade Organization rules. Now, leading Brexit supporters tell us there's nothing to fear from losing our special access to the single market. But to me, that seems to be profoundly wrong. Swapping the single market for World Trade Organization rules would mean our exports facing the European Union external tariff as well as hidden non-tariff barriers that could be adjusted to our disadvantage at any moment. One minister has speculated we could face tariffs of 3%, if only. But it's not so. It's much more likely that we will face tariffs on cars of 10%, on food of 14%, on drinks of 20%, and on dairy products of 36%. And even if a successful negotiation were to halve those tariffs, our exports would still be far more expensive to sell. And this would apply way beyond agriculture and the motor industry. And if, in retaliation, the UK were to impose tariffs on imports from our European partners, this would result in higher prices for the British consumer. And if we and the European Union agreed both to impose nil tariffs on one another, as some have speculated, World Trade Organization rules mean we would both, ourselves and Europe, have to offer nil tariffs to all the countries we trade with. That simply isn't going to happen. Now, this is all very complex, but it is crucial, and none of it has yet been properly explained to the British people. There have been attempts to reassure business by claiming that other nations trade with the European Union on purely World Trade Organization terms. That statement is simply wrong. China, the United States, and Japan all have side agreements with Europe on standards, on customs cooperation, on mutual recognition, and on investment. And these economic giants, with their huge economies, did so to protect their own European trade, even though none of them is exposed as we are, with half our entire exports going to Europe. Ultra-Brexit opinion is impatient to be free of European relationships, to become, in their words, a global player, sovereign, in control. I believe they are deceiving themselves and, as a result, are misleading the British nation. Before the modern world took shape, their ambition would have been credible. But the world has changed. The global market has taken root. And if we are to care for the people of our nation, philosophical fantasies must give way to national self-interest. We cannot prepare for tomorrow by living in the world of yesterday. I don't doubt the convictions of those who long for the seductive embrace of British exceptionalism. But those sentiments are out of date and in today's world simply wrong. Now, it's not my purpose to stir controversy, but the truth must be spoken. The ultra-Brexiteers have been mistaken, have been wrong in nearly all they have said or promised so far to the British nation. The promises of more hospitals, more schools, lower taxes, more money for transport were electioneering fantasy during the referendum. The 350 million a week, that notorious figure, that 350 million a week for the National Health Service was a ridiculous phantom. The reality is that if our economy weakens, as is forecast, there will not only be less money for the National Health Service, but very probably less money for every single one of our public services. Now, we were told that nobody was threatening our place in the single market. Well, that tune has changed. We were told that a trade deal with the European Union would be easy to get. We could do it in an afternoon. Wrong again. It was never going to be easy, and we are still not sure what outcome will be achieved. We were told memorably that Europe can whistle for their money, and we would not pay a penny in exit costs. Wrong again. Europe didn't even have to purse her lips to whistle before we'd agreed to pay £40 billion to meet legitimate liabilities. Now, I could go on, but I think the point is made. Suffice to say that nearly every one of the Brexit promises is, if I may quote Henry Fielding, and I do now, a very wholesome and comfortable doctrine to which there is but one objection, namely, it is not true. Now, people should pause and reflect. If the Brexit leaders were wrong in what they so enthusiastically said before, is it not possible that they are wrong in what they now say as well? The Prime Minister is seeking a frictionless border between Northern Ireland and the Republic. She is absolutely right to do so. This is a promise that must be honoured, and I wish her well. But so far, it's not materialised, nor, I fear, will it, unless we stay in a or the customs union. Those of us who warned of the risks that Brexit would bring to the still fragile peace process were told at the time that we didn't understand Irish politics. It now seems we understood it better than our critics. We need a policy urgently to protect the Good Friday Agreement, and we need one without delay. And it is our British responsibility to find one. We created the problem, not the European Union. We need to offer a solution and not simply oppose what other people suggest. Now, although the referendum was advisory only, the result gave the government the obligation to negotiate a Brexit. They couldn't avoid it. But they didn't have the obligation to negotiate any Brexit, not at all costs, and certainly not on any terms. The true remit can only be to agree a Brexit that honours the promises made to the British nation during the referendum. But so far, the promises have not been met and probably cannot be met. Many electors now know they were misled. Many more are beginning to realise it. So the electorate has every right to reconsider their decision. Meanwhile, our options become ever narrower. We have ruled out full membership, ruled out the single market and the customs union, ruled out joining the European Economic Area, dismissed talk of joining EFTA. A Norway deal won't do, we're told, nor will a Swiss deal, or a Ukraine deal, a Turkey deal, or a South Korean deal. No to all of them, say the government's red lines. So little is left, except cherry picking, which the European Union rejects, or a comprehensive deal, which will be very hard, if not impossible, to get. So compromises it must be, or no deal at all. It is now widely accepted that no deal would be the worst possible outcome. The compromise must therefore focus around our accepting single market rules, as Norway does, and paying for access, or an enhanced Canada deal, and it would need to be enhanced a very great deal indeed to be attractive. The Canada deal largely concerns goods, whereas the bulk of UK exports are services. But what we achieve to protect our interests may depend upon what we are prepared to concede. It is, as I say, in any negotiation, some give and some take. If our red lines dissolve, our options enlarge. Our minimum objective must be that, I quote, deep, special and bespoke trade deal the Prime Minister has talked of. So some unpalatable decisions lie ahead, with the cast iron certainty that the extreme and unbending Brexit lobby will cry betrayal at every compromise. But it is Parliament, not a small minority, that must decide our policy. I spoke earlier of the divisiveness of Brexit across every part of the United Kingdom. But in due time, even the Brexit debate will end. And when it does, we need the highest possible level of public acceptance for the outcome. It is in no one's interest, no one's at all, for the bitterness and the division to linger on. I see only one way to achieve that. It is already agreed that Parliament must pass legislation giving effect to the deal. A meaningful vote has been promised. This must be a decisive vote in which Parliament can accept or reject the final outcome, or send the negotiators back to seek improvements, or order a referendum so the public may approve what has been determined. That is what parliamentary sovereignty really means. But to minimize divisions in our country, and between and within the political parties, I believe the government should take a further, very brave and bold decision. I believe they should invite Parliament to accept or reject the final outcome on a free vote. I know the instinct historically of every government is to oppose free votes. But the government should weigh the advantages of having one very carefully. They may find it is in their own interest to do so. There are some very practical reasons in favour of a free vote. Brexit is a unique decision. It will affect the lives of the British nation for generations to come. And if it flops, there will be the most terrible backlash. If Brexit is whipped through Parliament, at a time when the public are so divided about it, voters will know who to blame if they end up poorer and weaker. So both democracy and prudence suggest a free vote. The deep divisions in our nation are more likely to be healed by a Brexit freely approved by Parliament than a Brexit forced through Parliament at the behest of a minority of convinced opponents of Europe. And a free vote would better reflect the reality that for every 17 voters who voted for Brexit, 16 opted to remain within the European Union. But regardless of whether a free vote is offered, parliamentarians must decide the issue on the basis of their own conscience, upon whether, in mature judgment, they really do believe that the outcome of the negotiations is in the best interests of the people they are elected to serve. By 2021, after the likely 2-year transition, it will be 5 years since the 2016 referendum. The electorate will have changed. Some voters will have left us. Many new voters will be enfranchised. Others may have changed their mind. Nobody can truly know what the will of the people may then be. So let Parliament decide or put the issue back to the people. And what is true for the House of Commons must apply to the House of Lords. Peers must ignore any noises off and be guided by their intellect and by their conscience. I have been a Conservative all my life. I don't enjoy being out of step with so many of my party, and I take no pleasure at all in speaking out as I have today. But it's as necessary to speak truth to the people as it is to speak truth to power. Leaving Europe is an issue so far-reaching, so permanent, so overarching, that it will have an impact on all our lives, and most especially on the young and their futures. With only 12 months to go, we need answers, not aspirations. This decision is far more than a party issue. It's about the future of our United Kingdom and everyone who lives in it. That is what matters, and that is why I'm here today. Thank you very much.